Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of Amonkhet spoilers, and we have a pretty exciting day today. Since yesterday, we've gotten some new mythics, some sweet new rares, maybe our first against the odds card, so let's jump right into it with our first new mythic, and that is Angel of Sanctions. So basically, a Banishing Light / Oblivion Ring on a 3/4 body for 5 mana. It also has Embalm, which is pretty nice, so even if your opponent kills it, you can always get it back from the graveyard as a token, exile the same permanent again, the one that you gave back when it dies, or another permanent, so there is some value there from the graveyard, which is pretty sweet. I mean, even just milling it into the graveyard seems like a pretty good deal. So obviously, the comparison here, it's sort of like a Fairgrounds Warden that's all grown up. Instead of just getting creatures, it can get any non-land permanent, plus you get a much bigger flying body. It's also a little bit like Cash Out or, you know, Banishing Light, Oblivion Ring, one of those type of spells. So that's kind of the space that Angel lives in. The question for Angel is really twofold in Standard. So for one thing, 4 toughness means it does die to a lot of removal, Grasp of Darkness, cut from cut to ribbons. It doesn't die to Fatal Push, but there's a lot of things that kill Angel, so I'm not sure if for 5 mana, in our current format, how safe it is to trust on this as removal. I think you almost got to look at it as a tempo play. Like, it comes down, it's going to get rid of something for a little while, maybe get in some damage, your opponent's probably going to find a removal spell to kill it, so they'll get their thing back. So you just got to play in a way that you don't get blown out by, I don't know, going on a big attack, your opponent killing it, getting back a blocker to kill one of your other creatures. So you got to play it carefully, but the effect is pretty powerful. The other thing is, how does it line up with the other creatures in the format? And right now, we still have Archangel Avacyn. Avacyn, of course, will rotate this fall, which I think might free up more space for Angel, but as of right now, it's hard to imagine wanting Angel of Sanctions over Archangel Avacyn, and honestly, with Heart of Kirin and how the format is at the moment with Copycat and Mardu vehicles, even Archangel Avacyn isn't seeing that much play at the moment, and it's a really absurd card. So I think Angel of Sanctions is fun, it's a new Angel, it's probably really strong in Commander, where this effect is very good, and maybe people won't immediately target it. So I think that that's where it lives for the near future, and then after rotation, we can have another conversation about if it can slide into the 5-drop slot over Avacyn. Maybe Heart of Kirin will have been banned, or something will change in the format to lessen the impact of Mardu vehicles. But a sweet card, but I think wait and see as far as Standard play is concerned. Next, we have a Black Mythic, and this one is really interesting. So Cruel Reality, 1,000,000 mana, actually 7, but a ton of mana. But the big thing is, it's a curse. It's an aura curse. They brought back a curse. So you enchant a player, at the beginning of that player's upkeep, they sack a creature or planeswalker. If they don't, they lose 5 life. So first off, let me get this out of the way right now. No questions asked. This card is not Standard playable. I know it's a mythic, it's sweet, but it's not Standard playable. However, I'm really excited for this card for 2 reasons. It's a curse, which means we can search it up with Curse of Misfortunes, we can find it with Bitterheart Witch, so this is an auto-include into Curse Commander, Curse Casual, Curse Against the Odds, anything like that. It's going to be one of the best curses. It's actually a reasonable payoff for Curse and Bitterheart Witch if you're getting this card for free, so I can't imagine playing this in Standard under essentially any circumstances. There's just no way I can see this effect being playable. However, I could definitely imagine playing this in Commander, has some nice political ramifications where you're choosing which opponent to put it on, and have a ton of ways to tutor around your library. So, Casual All-Star, really sweet flavor, not especially a Standard playable card. Moving on to a card which is definitely Standard playable, assuming there's a deck to fit it, and maybe even Modern playable. We have Soulscar Mage, which is essentially Monastery Swiftspear with a different upside. So Monastery Swiftspear, the upside is you get a 1/2 for 1 mana with prowess and haste, so you get in damage right away, you can draw it off the top and play a spell and pump it up, all that stuff. Soulscar Mage is exactly the same, except you trade haste for giving all sources of non-combat damage damage Wither, essentially. So this means when you Searing Blaze a Tarmogoyf, maybe it's too big to actually kill, but you're going to put those counters on it, so your opponent's Goyf is always going to be smaller. You can Lightning Bolt a Thought-Knot Seer and make it a 1/1 and finish it off with a Gut Shot, or a Grim Lavamancer. Same with all your points of damage, so being able to give everything Wither is actually a really strong ability because it lets you basically your damage isn't removed at end of turn, which is really powerful for a deck like Burn that might struggle against big creatures. One of the things Burn doesn't want to see necessarily is a turn 2 Tarmogoyf that just locks down all the Goblin Guides, all the Swiftspears. It's just this huge roadblock, but being able to put some counters on it with the Wither ability of Soulscar Mage can help you get out of that situation. In Standard, there's a few different options. One of the sweet ones is Walking Ballista. Seems pretty insane. Instead of just pinging a creature, you can actually leave those counters on your opponent's creatures and also trigger any -1/-1 counters matters themes that you might happen to have in your deck. Also, stuff like Shock and Harness Lightning gets a little bit better. Your opponent plays, I don't know, a Felidar Guardian. You need to kill it with Shock. You don't have a mana available. You can Shock it once and untap and Shock it again. Something like that. There's different ways you can kind of split up the damage of your burn spells when the damage sticks in the form of +1/+1 counters, which is pretty helpful. Plus, beyond all of it, it's a Monastery Swiftspear. Like, you're losing a very little bit, the haste ability, and it's exactly the same. Starting on turn 2, it works just like a Swiftspear, which is a modern and legacy staple. So I'm really excited for this card, even though it's an aggro card and not really my wheelhouse, but I think this card is going to be very strong. It's not going to replace Swiftspear, I don't think, but it could show up alongside Swiftspear or be a sideboard option for decks in older formats. Next up, we have, oh man, probably my favorite card of the day, New Perspectives, and this card is essentially Fluctuator. Yes, it's 6 mana, yes, it requires blue mana, yes, you gotta have 7 cards in your hand, all these conditions, but if you can get this active, you have a Fluctuator. Fluctuator, all your cards cycle for free. It's so insane. So yes, I don't know where this fits competitively, but the reward is super high. It draws you 3 cards, which will hopefully get you to that 7 card point, and then you can just cycle through your entire deck to find whatever you want. No questions asked. So in Standard, this means you can trigger Archfiend of Ifnir over and over and over again. Wrath your opponent's entire board for free. Just cycle, cycle, cycle. Drakehaven suddenly costs 1 mana because you're cycling for free. You cycle, you get a 2/2 Drake. So essentially you can use this like a Sword of the Meek, Thopter Foundry type of combo in Standard if you get them both out together, because you can just cycle, 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 and for everyone you get a 2/2 Drake. So I'm unreasonably excited for this card. Like I said, will it really work out in competitive play and break the tournament scene? I don't know. I think that the payoff is high enough that I'm not going to write it off completely, but I can tell you that I'm going to play a ton of this card because cycling is awesome. Cycling for free is even more awesome, and we have a ton of payoffs, and this isn't even to consider older formats where you have Lightning Rift, you have Astral Slide. Of course, you're not going to play this in Legacy. It's too much mana. I don't think it's worth it. But in Commander, in casual decks, this card is super sweet, and it's going to be played all over the place. Maybe not on the tournament scene, but pretty much any place else you can imagine, because it is that good and that sweet and that unique. Next up, we have Welcome to Against the Odds. This week, we're playing Approach of the Second Sun. So Approach of the Second Sun is probably the most against the odds card we've seen so far. If you cast it from your hand and you would cast another copy of it, or another copy of it this game, you win the game. So the idea is basically you cast one of these and then eventually you cast another one and it remembers that you cast the first one and then you win the game. If you're not winning the game when you cast it, you gain 7 life and put it in your library 7 cards from the top. So 7 turns from now, you get to cast it again. Basically, having a 7 mana sorcery, obviously it's a lot of mana, but just being able to cast a spell twice in a game, even a 7 mana spell, and just have it end, is a really easy way to win the game. So I don't think this is going to be competitive, but it is very easily going to show up in commander decks. It seems like a great finisher in those decks where you have tutors, you have the ability to just like cast it, demonic tutor for it, cast it again, win the game, and it's not unreasonable to make that amount of mana in commander, and we will certainly be playing it on Against the Odds, because winning the game with an alternate win condition like this is probably about the best way you can win a game of Magic. Next we have a card that I don't really understand, Bounty of the Locks, and this card is halfway like a Howling Mine, halfway like a Dark Ritual. The problem is you don't have that much control over it, so basically how this works is one turn you get to draw a card from Bounty. The next turn, instead of drawing a card, you will add a colorless, a green, and a blue. Problem with cards like this is sometimes it's doing the thing you don't want it to do. It's the Arlen Chord problem. When you want to be lightning bolting something, you're making a token. When you want to be making a token, you're lightning bolting. So that problem is definitely present with Bounty of the Locks, but both things it does are good. Drawing a card half the time and adding mana half the time is pretty powerful, so I expect it'll see casual / commander play. Outside of that, I just don't know. I haven't seen any real combos for it. I don't think it's fast enough for standard, but it does have two pretty appealing abilities, and sweet art and super sweet flavor. Next we have Patre, Vizier of Poisons, and this card is pretty powerful, surprisingly powerful. Question is, in standard right now, we have a plethora of really strong green-black 2-drops. It's so strange that there's so many good cards with this exact mana cost that are so similar. So where does Patre fit in this pantheon? And I'm really not sure. That's the thing. Like, Winding Constrictor, if you're playing Energy, you want it. Grimflayer, if you're playing Delirium, you want it. You're not going to play a Patre over either of those in those archetypes. However, if there's a -1/-1 counter archetype, Patre is good enough that you would play that over Grimflayer and Winding Constrictor, so we'll really have to see where it breaks down. One place I'm really excited to play it is in green-black snake commander decks. So while it technically isn't a snake itself, it is maybe the best green-black snake commander. I guess you can play Pharika, but green-black snakes gives you a lot of different options that you don't have in mono-green snakes. Not only can you play it in Snake Tribal, but it seems like one of the absolute best commanders if you're going to play a -1/-1 counter theme. There's a big payoff for being a -1/-1 counter deck with Patre as your commander. So we'll see what happens in standard. It's fighting with the other powerful options, but a shoo-in for commander decks, both for snakes and for -1/-1 counter themes. Finally, a couple of other cards. We're getting kind of near the end. Hazoret's Favor is a rare. It's very aggressive. I'm just not sure where it fits. You kind of turn everything into a ball lightning, essentially, because then you got to sacrifice it at the beginning of your end step. So you kind of give your creature a big bonus, but it's going to die at the end of turn. The downside is you don't get trample. I think that's what this card is missing for me to think it was actually playable. Just turn all of your random dorks into ball lightning seems really powerful. And while this could still be good, I mean, you can kind of win out of nowhere just by slamming a bunch of creatures and getting in every turn with this hasty threat. There's a big cost to it because you're sacking your stuff. So I don't know. I'm not super sold on it. I'd like it more if it had trample. However, I am super sold on Dissenter's Deliverance. This immediately jumps, I think, to the very top of standard as far as artifact removal. I think it's the new best artifact removal spell. 2 mana, puts it on curve with Naturalize, doesn't hit enchantments, but enchantments aren't really a big problem in standard. We're mostly concerned about artifacts, and it has Cycling for 1, which makes almost any card somewhat playable, because you can always trade it in for something else. So maybe this is the card that can put an end to the reign of terror of Heart of Kirin and Mardu vehicles, so we'll see, but I expect to see this in a lot of sideboards moving forward. Finally, just a little bit of limited stuff. Wing Shepherd, Supply Caravan, Nimble Blade, Kanra. Not really exciting for constructed in any way, but sweet flavor, camels and jackal warriors and angels and cycling. So fun limited cards, cool flavor cards, glad they exist. And that's been our daily Amonkhet spoilers for today. So what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? How good is the Angel? How strong is the Black Curse Mythic? Do you see anything else for Constructed today? We talked a lot about cards that are going to be really sweet in Commander and in casual play. Did I gloss over anything that makes any of these cards good for Standard or good for Modern that I'm missing? How excited are you for Cycling.deck? What else do you want to do with these cards? Let me know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.